Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
Clean sweep for the Irish provinces in the United Rugby Championship. We had Connacht beating the Bulls by 34 points to 7. Ulster, a bonus point win, of course, last week against Glasgow. They beat Zebre away 36 points to 3. Munster against the Stormers, an interesting game at Thomond Park, 34-18 in the end. Doesn't tell the full story of the first half, certainly. And then Rodney Parade, Dragons 6, Leinster 7 was an odd scoreline and an odd game in some ways. Very happy to say Cian Tracey from the Irish Independent is with us. Hey, Cian.
Hey, Joe, how are things?
And Gordon Darcy is along as well. Hey, Gordon.
Joe, how are you getting on?
Yeah, very well. Might just touch on Connacht before we get into the Munster game. I know you watched that as well, Gordon. So Connacht, they were 7-0 up, I think, inside 2 minutes. Jack Carty and Tom Daly, excellent throughout. I didn't see this game, but it seemed like it was really impressive Connacht performance. And Jake White talking about how players at Connacht only take contracts there to try and get noticed by quote-unquote bigger teams, and the Leinster players who don't get contracts go down to Connacht. Probably not the greatest thing to say right before you head out to the sports ground.
Yeah, I'd say in hindsight he probably regrets that. I'd say he just didn't like. I think there's we have to accept that a lot of these South African teams are still getting used to Northern Hemisphere rugby. Listening to something with Matt Giddo, and he was saying that they just don't watch European rugby. So I doubt they spent a huge amount of time on Connacht, and much to their detriment. They started like I'd say Jake White's looking at that. He's trying to not throw his players under the bus, but really they were outplayed and they were outcoached. And I'd say that was probably wrangling in the back of his head.
Interesting. Any ways in particular you would have said they were outcoached?
Just it's the Bulls, and to a certain extent the Stormers, from the two teams I watched at the weekend. They're playing a watered down version of what South Africa do. That kind of very, very physical, confrontational approach. And yeah, they got some dominance against Connacht, some big penalties in the scrum. They got a couple of mauls going, but ultimately their lack of quality at delivering basic skills undid them. Whereas you look at what Connacht were able to do, which was Jack Harty, even though it was under pressure in the early 20-30 minutes, just kept at it and just didn't disappear, didn't drift off the gain line, kept going, kept his team on the front foot. And eventually Tom Daly, Tom Farrell got to the fore, and Connacht kept their game plan. Was just it was much more impressive. The South Africans just relied on route one, and then when they didn't get the inroads they needed consistently enough, they don't have the players to think their way out of a game, and they're not asked to do that regularly. The guy on the wing, Jacobs, arguably their most dangerous player. Jeez, every time he got the ball, he just looked electric. He got his first pass, I think, at about 68 or 70 minutes. And that tells you everything you need to know about a team. When a winger touches the ball for the first time from one of his own players in the last 12 minutes of a game, that's a fairly good illustration of how they were set up.
King Connacht are in for a tough season with the new format, and qualifying for the Champions Cup is going to be difficult, and they won't even have the international windows where there are more international players away at other clubs and provinces where they can make hay. At times they've done that in the past, so they would have been disappointed last week to lose the way they did in Cardiff. And that's what makes Friday night such a big win against the Bulls, who would have been smarting from the Leinster game. They have the Dragons in Galway on Saturday coming, Connacht, and then they're away at Thomond in week 4, and they have Ulster at home week 5, and then it's take a breath with the November International. So you can't overstate what a big victory it was. And then Dragons coming on Saturday, that's a chance for Connacht to get some momentum going in a big way.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you give, Cian, you belt out there.
Sorry, Gordon. I think it was the manner of the victory really that was so pleasing. I know we'll get on to talk about Munster, but you look at Connacht scored 5 tries and they were all scored by backs, which was seriously impressive. They went down early on, like you said, Joe, and having been beaten last weekend, their heads could easily have dropped. And the thing about Connacht is there's been so much change there in the summer in terms of the coaching setup. I know Andy Friend is still there and he's doing a really good job at what he has, but you look at their defence coach Pete Wilkins has gone from defence to attack. Dewald Senecal has come in from Grenoble, and then Mossy Lawler and Collie Tucker have been promoted from the academy. So there's a lot of new ideas there being put into the melting pot. And I think that was going to be one of the biggest challenges for Connacht in the early part of the season, is how quickly they can adapt to those new ideas. But some of the tries that they scored were seriously good. Matt Hansen's try, I know it's only week 2 in the season, but you'll struggle to see a better try all season than that. And that's another kind of, it's an interesting one. Matt Hansen has come in. Not many people would have been aware of him. He played with the Brumbies, and Andy Friend has his real knack of, finding, unearthing these hidden gems, really. He's a guy's only 23, but to score a try like that in the conditions, Jake White spent so long. He was at it after the game as well, talking about playing up a hill in the wind and the rain, but Connacht certainly had no problem, and I know they're more used to it, but running in tries, like I said, 5 tries from the backs, I thought spoke volumes for their approach.
Also complaining about a hill. One, is there a big hill in the sports ground, Gordon? And secondly, you get the hill for the other 40 minutes. It's a silly thing to bring up.
Yeah, it's a level playing field, because exactly as you're saying, you get it for one half and you don't get it for the other. I think where Connacht played, and Cian's right, they scored 4 tries through their backs. They really have to be playing that type of a game, because they're tight 5 and their pack is not built to go toe to toe with them, and that's going to be their Achilles heel right the way through this season. You're talking about the list of games they have coming up. This is a very different Munster team coming to that they'll be facing. I think this is the other end of the spectrum. Munster scored 4 tries through their pack.
Yeah.
So it's going to be it's going to be very different and very hard for them, because they just, and while getting Mac Hansen is a great, he's great. They weren't overly short on outside backs. You would have loved to seen a 6'8", 6'10" second row going in there to add a bit of ballast in there. I know they signed, I'm going to get his name wrong now, the second row. Yeah, thank you. I wasn't even going to try a stab at that. He's kind of papering over the crack. They need a little bit. They need him. They need Papa Ely to be fit and to be playing regularly to have a chance. Because they are a lightweight squad, and they need to play. And I think Cian's right. They're playing a type of game that Andy Friend is playing to their strengths, which is playing at that tempo, but it's high risk stuff. And as soon as Jack Harty isn't there, they start looking a little bit light.
To Munster 34, Stormers 18 then. I suspect a lot of people would have watched this match live on television. Nice kick-off time. Stormers in town. Keen to give the blunt summary for people who didn't see the game, and then we can pick out all the nuance and get your thoughts on it. First, I suppose 38 minutes really. Stormers play all the rugby, look very good ball in hand at times. Few Munster mix up in defence. Suddenly it's 15-0 to the Stormers. They could have had another try. Peter O'Mahony fingertips avert disaster there. Munster get crucial try just before half time, so it's 15-7, and you kind of feel they'll kick on in the second half, and they do, but it's all very much about, and Gordon referenced it, power, forward oriented play. You wouldn't say it was all about craft and free flowing rugby, and in the end Munster power wins out 34 points to 18. That's, like I said, a blunt summary of the game. It was a pretty interesting watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the Stormers, I'm sure we'll get onto it, the South African teams have flattered to deceive in the first 2 weeks. But we've just mentioned the Bulls against Connacht. They're supposed to be the strongest of the South African teams. But yeah, the Stormers, they really hurt Munster early on. And, Munster may be damned if they do, damned if they don't at the moment. They did show, unbelievable character to turn it around. But I do agree with you, Joe. I think it's all well and good, playing a game like that against an understrength Stormers team, but we've seen Munster come unstuck by playing a similar limited game plan when it matters most against your Leinsters and your Saracens over the last few years. And obviously we're picking out some of the strongest teams in Europe, but ultimately that's where Munster have fallen short. But look, there was still a lot to like from their performance. I think you mentioned there Peter O'Mahony's intervention. For me, that was the real turning point on 24 minutes. It was absolutely crucial, because if the Stormers go in there and score a third try, it's a massive uphill battle for them. But they really collapsed, and I think so much of that was down to the pressure that Munster exerted. Jack O'Donoghue's try just in half-time was crucial, and then the Stormers had a yellow card just after half-time, and then Munster followed up with a try, I think through Jean Klein, I think it was. So you're talking about crucial time of the game there, before halftime and after halftime, and the yellow card, and that was the game really. But yeah, look, there was I suppose a disappointing lack of invention. But if Munster are running out with a bonus point win, I suppose Johan van Graan will say it was a case of job done. But I was down in Limerick the week before last for the Sharks game, and you could see a lot of what Munster were trying to do. It wasn't perfect, but they were absolutely trying to move the ball wide. But there was none of that. There was bits and pieces, to be fair, but it was definitely more they were looking to keep it up the jumper. And like I said, you look at Connacht scoring 5 tries through their backs. Munster's 5 tries were scored through their forwards, which is probably a perfect summary of how they look to play. But look, they're 2 bonus point wins after 2. I don't think we can complain. But I think going forward for the season, for Munster, it's all about getting a better balance between having that forward game and getting their backs more involved, because they had so much firepower there.
Yeah, Gordon, I was watching pre-match. The Stormers head coach John Dobson was doing an interview with Murray Kinsella on RTE, and I was raising an eyebrow, because he was talking about how, well, look, playing against this Irish side, they're all going to be about power and set piece, and of course once they get into the 22, we're used to a bit more glitz and glam inside 22. They'll just be one-off runners, and you're kind of thinking, who's the South African team and who's the Irish team here? And yet it played out exactly as he said, really. I mean, I know you said maybe the Stormers' game plan is kind of watered down South African, but to be fair, they played all the rugby in the game, and I don't know, did they run out of steam, or just they didn't have the power to compete with Munster? But first half, I know who the better passing team were.
Yeah, and that is fair, but I think you've I can't believe I'm actually about to defend Munster, which is
hold your nose and do it.
It is, yeah. It's so COVID, but I think the Stormers' approach was still very, very direct. A couple of crucial line breaks, and they were. For any team to be able to unwind from them was, to get back into the defensive fight was going to be hard. It was still, born off of fairly direct play. I think, also got to put that there's an awful lot of I think there's for this Munster team. I think it's still only the second game of the year, and I think Joey Carberry is probably the guy who hasn't clicked yet. I'm just glad that he's played 2 games in a row, and there's no injuries. He's starting to get a little bit of consistency from him. He's doing very, very little wrong, but not doing anything that we're used to from Joey Carberry. And I think there's a balance between what Munster need to achieve this season. And for the first time in a long time, we've said, I can't believe people would actually be complaining about it, that we saw Munster pack bully another team. That is, if you go down and talk to the faithful, you talk about Munster DNA, that's what it's about, a tight 5 dominance. And look how well they played once they established that tight 5 dominance. Now, they did score the tries through the pack, but the least path of resistance and all that, there was still an awful lot to be impressed by, particularly the offloading game. I think Gavin Coombs, for me, is a really important player for Munster. And a couple of his offloads really changed the tempo of the Munster attack. A couple of his carries again changed the direction of their attack. He's one of the few, he is so important to everything that Munster are doing at the moment, and he was part of that, because he actually had a fairly poor opening 30 minutes, but he came back into it in the last 10. But his second half was absolutely outstanding. So I think there's the high press that the Stormers play it can be very, very stifling. And I think for the Irish players, they're going to have to get used to that, about how they unpick these defences and how they get in behind them, so they're not reliant on the pack. I think that's probably why Joey Carberry's been so quiet, because he's had two weeks back to back where he's just had back rows and things shooting up at him, and he's had to be patient. But I think once they find that balance, and once they have a few more players coming back, and Delande coming back, Chris Farrell coming back, there's an awful lot to be excited about with this Munster team.
Fair enough, because that's a far more positive slant, because I was sort of thinking along the lines of Cian as well, that they won't be able to bully a bigger team in Europe the way they did on Saturday, that they'll need a bit more craft. And to be fair,
I think you've got to realise they are big though. When you look you've got RG Snyman, you've got Klein, you've got the other Safa guy there, and you've got Ty Byrne to come back in, Jack O'Donoghue. Like, that's a big pack. So I don't think there's you look at La Rochelle and these things, and they have one or two big Munster have that. Like Gavin Coombs was able to mix it with any of the South African counterparts. So they do have a pack that can potentially do that. You don't want it to be your only, and that's where I think that's the bit that we need to understand and we need to see from Munster, is the coaching up to getting them more than just a one-trick pony. Because if they don't have any more guile and they don't have any more subtlety than just relying on Simon and Klein to smash things, they are in trouble. But I am giving some of the passing in the wider channels, particularly Peter O'Mahony and Jack O'Donoghue linking rather than looking for contact. That leaves me very optimistic with this group.
Okay. Fair enough. That's interesting, because I suppose, Cian, part of the problem for Munster in the early season is they almost can't win because they don't have the credit in the bank that Leinster have. Like, we'll probably get on to Leinster and Rodney Parade, and it's like just a mess. It's just one of those days. They have so much credit in the bank, though, there won't be an overreaction to that. If Munster had put in that performance at Rodney Parade, Van Graan would be coming under huge pressure. So it is interesting to hear Gordon there play up some of the positives that he is seeing.
Yeah, but the thing about it is as well, I think back to how Munster started last season, and the quality of rugby was incredible, but they kind of retreated into their shells as the season went on, and when it came to the crunch, the kind of rugby they were playing at the start of the season was nowhere to be seen. Now this, I think, has been a little bit different at the start of the season. I think Gordon is right to highlight Joey Carberry. I think he's still working his way back to full fitness, and I suppose it's probably more of a mental thing. Like, he's had such a long time out of the game in terms of physically, but I wonder mentally, obviously Gordon would be better placed to comment on that, but how long it takes to actually get back to where he needs to be. To me, it seems like opposition teams are really targeting him in defence. He's fallen off a few tackles in the first 2 weeks, and I think that is a little bit of a concern, because we've seen Joey Carberry pick up injuries in the past from, because it's through no fault of his own. Like, he's brave to a fault almost, like he'll always put himself in the way, but those tackles just aren't quite sticking. So I think that's something that Munster are really going to need to sort out going forward. I think, it's great to see the younger players, I think, really stepping up at the start of the season. Gavin Coombs has really picked up where he left off last season. I think someone like Craig Casey, is really making the most of Conor Murray's kind of delayed return after the Lions tour. I think someone like, Gordon is talking about the size of the pack. I think a lot of the time in the last couple of years where they've been a little bit short, in my opinion, is maybe in the front row. I think particularly, at tight head, and I think, Keenan Knox now is really breaking through. He didn't have it all his own way last weekend, but he's a big, powerful young South African who's been over here for a few years now, but he's the type of player I think that Munster need to break through to help them. He's not an RG Snyman, a ready-made guy who's going to help you in the morning, win a Heineken Cup, but I really think in the next couple of years he's the kind of guy that Munster need to be looking to break through.
So I don't know, because I'm watching the first half, Gordon, and all I'm seeing from Munster is Casey kicking the ball from his own half. They're not keeping possession. They're posing no threat. It's one-off runners. Stormers, plenty of energy. I mean, second half, Stormers have a sin bin, which doesn't help them, but Stormers full of energy. They're able to handle what Munster are throwing at them. And I'm kind of thinking, this is really average. I don't really see what they're trying to do. The one moment they actually posed a bit of a threat was when they took a bit of a gamble with a few passes and they got up the left-hand side, and I think the try was disallowed. Peter O'Mahony was like a third-man latch. But fair enough, I take all your points about packs bigger and it'll compete at European level. I still look at that first half when the Stormers had that bit of energy about them and were really in the game. And you would just still say Munster lack a bit of craft. Like the same way they just couldn't hurt Leinster in the final of last year's competition. You would say, is it really improving dramatically? That'd be the nagging worry still with Munster.
Yeah, and I think like it's dangerous to just look at a portion of the game. And I actually, and Joe, I'll probably go back to what you said. They don't have credit in the bank. So you kind of answered your own question, because they did ultimately go on, win the game, and win the game quite comfortably, and began to almost purr in the second half.
Yeah.
So they don't have that. What you have there is we have that nagging sense of, oh, is this feels an awful lot like last season, where, you know, flattering to deceive. So they have to earn it, and they're going to earn it. They're going to have to earn it the hard way, and there's no other way around it, because they don't have, I'm going to say, credit in the bank for the third time in one sentence. So they just don't have it.
Yeah.
So they have to earn it, and every time they don't execute well out of their half, every time their line out malfunctions, somebody's going to go, oh, until they ultimately win. But like, if you can still win and play poorly, for me, and again, I'm going to go back to Gavin Coombs, that his ability to suck up a really poor first third, not let it damage his performance, and come back and ultimately be one of the key guys, one of the key leaders on the field for the other 60 minutes or 50 minutes. I think that's really good for me. And same with Casey. The guys, they're going, so they're not firing, but they're able to play their way back into the game. So to me, that's really good from an individual piece. It's the broader collective piece where we're talking, and we're saying that they need to be a little bit more. Needs to be a little bit more to them. There's going to be sterner tests ahead, and they won't get that. But I suppose when you get to those clutch matches, if you're winning along the way, that sense of belief in what the coaches have been doing over the preseason, as long as it's not defaulting back to doing box kicks as your opening salvo, I think there will be they'll take an awful lot of confidence from that. And then once they get that first clutch win in the season, that's when things can really change among the group. But that's, there is going to be, it's not going to be a season defining one, but it's going to be a fairly pressure game in the next 4 or 5 games.
Gordon, do you anticipate we're going to see more Keith Earls in midfield?
No.
I'll move on.
Listen, Earlsy, like he just launched his coffee company there. If anyone doesn't know it, it's 1114 Coffee Roasters. He is a phenomenal winger, and he is like, I can't see him. I can see him playing matches like this where, where if they're short, he can slot in. But I see, like, his value is in the wing. And I know they're crowded back there, but I don't think you're going into a match without Delande and Farrell in the centre and Earls on one of the wings.
Yeah. Scarlets away on Sunday. They've Connacht at home in week 4, Ospreys away week 5, and then they'll break off for the November internationals. Cian, people might be interested. I don't know if there's any word on the investigation into the alleged bite on Niall Scannell. The referee, to be fair, looked at it in real time when Peter O'Mahony came over and said you can see the bite mark. Footage was definitely inconclusive. I doubt they're going to unearth some conclusive footage. So I'd say that one will just drift out to sea, or what are you hearing?
Yeah, well, it's all been quiet today, George, like trying to find out information. But I mean, I think the one thing you'd say is you would very rarely see a player accuse another player of something so serious if there wasn't in it. But I suppose if the footage isn't there now, I don't know if there's other angles that the TMO, or deciding commissioner rather, will have access to that we didn't see on TV, perhaps. But it's obviously a very serious allegation. It probably soured the game a little bit.
Yeah. Gordon, not much you can add to that specific incident. Was it a trend which had pretty much died out of your rugby experience as your career progressed, or is it happening more frequently than I might suspect?
No, it's not. Like, to be honest, it's one of those things that never really happened. There's plenty of other stuff that happens, but biting just didn't seem to be one of them. Like, I remember the last time, like Peter Clossy, he had an interesting one playing for Munster, but like the French guys would all be sticking fingers in your eyes with deep heat on it and going for between your legs with deep heat and stuff, and grabbing and yanking and stuff. But biting just seemed to be one of those things that was never really done. So yeah, it is. It's kind of, yeah. it's really, like, it's just really dirty, isn't it? It just leaves a really bad taste. Oh my God, I was going to leave that pun, bad taste in the mouth.
Yeah.
Hopefully this either just draw, like, kill it or cure it, either find something, ban him, or just move on at this stage.
Cian, I think last of the weekend was at Rodney Parade, Dragons against Leinster. I think most people anticipated fairly comprehensive and easy Leinster win. In the end, it was Dragons 6, Leinster 7. They didn't score after Max Deegan's try in the 14th minute. Few Leinster changes, but still lots of internationals in there, lots of big names. There was just a sloppiness about Leinster in the ruck. There were handling errors. I think 22 turnovers to the Dragons 11, 22 Leinster turnovers to Dragons 11. Errors in the line out as well. Traditionally, Leinster have been very good at avoiding dropping down to opposition level. It's hard to know what was going on here. It's not something we see from them very often.
No, it was a tough watch, Joe, to be honest. It was pretty dire. I suppose, like a Sunday afternoon in Rodney Parade, the rain coming down, it's not the most glamorous place to be. But at the same time, you know, maybe Leinster were a bit complacent. You mentioned the 23 turnovers, 14 missed tackles, 11 penalties conceded, 6 lost lineouts. Like, they're the kind of stats that are unheard of, really, from a Leinster point of view, no matter how many changes they make. And you know what, in a funny way, maybe it'll be a blessing in disguise if they had went there and, you know, put 30, 40 points on the Dragons. What would Leo Cullen and Stuart Lancaster have gotten out of that? But maybe they will have learned a thing or two about a few of the players there, because, like, the Leinster environment is so competitive at the moment that if you're a young guy, if you're a guy coming back from injury, you have to take absolutely every opportunity that you get. So, I mean, no matter if it's in Newport on a Sunday afternoon, you know, there really is no excuses. To be fair, the Dragons put like a bit of pressure on Leinster, but they were just so uncharacteristically sloppy, particularly in the Dragons 22, you know, sloppy knock-ons, really disjointed. They had very little direction. But yeah, like, you know, the review, I'm sure this morning was probably going to be an ugly affair, but like I said, maybe Leinster in the long run will actually get more out of a really poor display like that. Look, they did get away with the win. They'll probably be seriously relieved. I mean, I thought the end game really summed up how muddled Leinster were. I think it was Kieran Frawley kicked the ball back with about 5 seconds left on the clock, kicked it back to Dragons, which gave them a chance to come down the other end, and then the ball squirts loose. Dan Levy, for some strange reason, kicks the ball along the ground back to Hugo Keenan, who's under pressure. And you're talking like the clock is well in the red now. And then Gary Ringrose eventually gets the ball off the pitch. It was just, it was schoolboy stuff at times, but not what you're used to seeing from a Leinster point of view.
Rugby on Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone, official sponsor of the Irish Rugby team of us, everyone in. We're talking with Cian Tracey of the Irish Independent and Gordon Darcy. Gordon, you won't be familiar with Rodney Parade. It's where a team called the Dragons play their home matches. It's over in Wales. You should take a look sometime. I
was there when the lights went out.
Oh, you did play there. Good man.
Oh yeah, listen, you got to remember, there was my wilderness years. I was there playing with Pete McKenna and all the guys. We had to play a third of the match with only 3 of the 4 floodlights working.
So look, it's a glamorous place. Look, you've been inside the Leinster machine now at this stage. Is a weird shocker of a performance like this? Yeah, quick review. Let's never let it happen again and forget about it. Or would something like this concern you, looking in from the outside in any great way? No, like, I think I would say, you know, and there's a few new faces in there, and I would say they didn't pay them the respect they deserved, and that's probably something that you can't insulate a group from. They have to. Usually, it comes with a loss, and then players kind of reflect on it and kind of look at their preparation and how they went. But you just looked at some of the decisions that players were making, the passing, you know, the accuracy, the breakdown work in particular, and that was a piece. Players didn't really know whether should they be at a breakdown, should they not, and then I think we have to be fair to Dragons as well and say they really competed at certain breakdowns, and Leinster didn't have anyone on the field to make a decision and to respond to it. There was no, as Cian said, the direction from Leinster seemed a little bit off, because they were able to get
accessing the wide channels almost for fun. But then their next ruck and their next piece, it just seemed like the pieces of training weren't ready, weren't together. The people who were trying to go to the rucks or trying to get the next phase, two or three phases together, it was just a little bit disjointed. So to me, that's players are having to think rather than having to react. It's not instinctive. So that week's preparation wasn't right. So I'm sure the coaches will look at that, but more importantly, I think the players have to look at that. And for some young players coming through, this is what being a professional is all about. It's finding a way to treat Dragons with the same respect as playing the Bulls in the Aviva, and that's hard. But that's what being a good professional is about. Yeah.
And a last one: what have you made of the United Rugby Championship thus far? South African sides, I think, lost 6 of 8.
It's been fun. It's been really, really fun. We're seeing lots of tries. I loved watching Connacht play at the weekend. I loved watching Leinster play last week. Munster, Ulster. We're seeing lots from the Irish provinces at the moment. Obviously, very, very focused in on that. It is going to be the other side of the coin when we go down there in the second half after the November window, when it's going to be hot. South Africa's going to have a few more South Africans back in. These teams are set up to play with fully loaded teams. They don't have the depth of squads that we do. They don't, like, it's unheard of. If you ask anyone in South Africa, would they use 56 players in a season? They'd look at you. They almost play the same starting 15, 12 times a year in the Super Rugby. So when they get their Springboks back, coming off that big win against the All Blacks, they're going to be looking for some payback when we get in there. So I think there is a bit of rebalancing to be done, and to be honest, I'm looking forward to that as well, because it might turn into a home and away thing, but for me the URC has been really, really exciting.
Okay, fellas, super stuff. Gordon Darcy, Cian Tracey, thanks a million.
Thanks, guys.